Hi guys, my name is Subhak Gupta. I am a final year student of BCom Honors in Shahid Bhagat Singh College. So today I'll be discussing the reverse charge mechanism under GST, specifically section 9 subsection 4 and some of the other provisions related to RCM with you guys. So I have a PowerPoint presentation ready with me. Here it is. So let's get started. So first of all, let's see what we are going to cover in this presentation. I'll be talking about introduction to RCM, that is reverse charge mechanism, section 9 subsection 4, GST registration under RCM, input tax credit under RCM, time of supply for goods under reverse charge mechanism, time of supply for services under reverse charge mechanism, and the compliances related to RCM. So, let me give you a brief overview. In certain cases, although it is possible, but it is inconvenient for the government for collection of taxes from supplier of goods or services. For example, when goods are sold by unregistered person to registered person, the tax cannot be recovered from the supplier because such unregistered supplier is not allowed to collect tax. Now, under such circumstances, if the responsibility of liability for payment of tax is shifted from supplier to recipient, the tax collection mechanism will be faster and convenient by avoiding such leakage in tax revenue. There are also cases when numerous suppliers of service provide services to one consolidated recipient. Now, in this case also, tax may be collected from the receiver instead of collecting from scattered suppliers. This service provided by the service provided by the insurance agents to the insurance companies is a classic example is in this regard. The shifting of liability to pay tax directly by recipient, that is insurance company in this case, to the government will ensure smooth functioning of tax collection. This is technically termed as reverse charge mechanism. So under GST, the liability to pay GST is determined on the basis of the charge mechanism. It can be of two types. Forward charge mechanism, that is, it is a default charge mechanism where GST is payable by the taxable person who is supplying goods and or services. But there's another type of charge mechanism, that is reverse charge mechanism. In some cases, GST is payable by person who is recipient of the goods or services or both. The collection mechanism when recipient of supply is made liable to pay tax is called as reverse charge mechanism. The objective of reverse charge mechanism is to widen the scope of levy of taxes on unorganized sectors and give exemption to specific class of supplier of goods, services, and import of services. So therefore, under reverse charge mechanism, the liability to pay tax is fixed on the recipient of supply of goods or services instead of the supplier or provider in respect of certain categories of goods or services or both under section 9 subsection 3 or section 9 subsection 4 of the CGST Act 2017. Let's move forward. Section 9 subsection 4. It has been amended as follows. In section 9 of the Principal Act for subsection 4, the following subsections shall be substituted, namely, the government may, on the recommendations of the council, by notification, specify a class of registered persons who shall, in respect of supply of specified categories of goods or services or both received from an unregistered supplier, pay the tax on reverse charge basis as the recipient of such supply of goods or services or both, and all the provisions of this act shall apply to such recipient as if he is the person liable for paying the tax in relation to such supply of goods or services or both. Well. Let's see what are the important interpretations from the above provision that I just read. This section does not attract RCM provisions on every purchases made by registered recipient from unregistered supplier. It is applicable on specified class of registered recipients and in respect of specified categories of goods or services. The class of registered persons and goods or services are to be notified by the government on the recommendation of GST Council. If the recipient is covered under Section 9, subsection 4, then he will be held liable for payment of GST on such transaction. The amended Section 9, subsection 4 is effective from 1st Feb 2019. The status of applicability is as follows. From 1st April 2009 onwards, the government has notified few cases on which this subsection is applicable. As per this notification, subject to certain conditions, if a promoter of a real estate project procures input services, and capital goods from unregistered suppliers, he is required to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. Let's move forward. Then comes the point of GST registration under RCM. A person who is required to pay tax under reverse charge has to compulsorily register under GST irrespective, mind this word, irrespective of the threshold of turnover of rupees 20 lakh in general and rupees 10 lakhs in special category states required for registration. So let me give you an example. If a person of Delhi whose turnover is 15 lakh rupees, he still needs to register for for paying tax under reverse charge mechanism if he is liable to pay the tax under RCM. In this case, even though his turnover is less than the threshold limit of turnover required for registration, he still requires to get himself registered because he is liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. Then comes the point of input tax credit under RCM. Input tax credit is the credit of tax paid by the person on its inputs, be it goods or services or both. Thus, a recipient of goods or service is entitled to receive input tax credit. Under reverse charge mechanism also, recipient of goods and services is entitled to get input tax credit of the tax paid by it and deposited to the concerned authority. A supplier cannot take input tax credit of GST paid on goods or services used to make supplies on which the recipient is liable to pay tax under reverse charge. For example, XYZ Limited took the services of director and paid the fees to the director and also paid the GST applicable on it. In this case, reverse charge mechanism applies and thus the company is liable to deposit the tax to the concerned authority. In this case, company can take the ITC of such tax paid by it because it is the recipient and it can avail input tax credit. Whereas it is an output tax for the director of the company. Thus, director cannot take the ITC of such tax paid by the company. GST paid on goods or services under reverse charge mechanism is available as ITC to the registered person provided that such goods or services are used or will be used for business or furtherance of business. Next comes the point of time of supply for goods under reverse charge. As per Section 12, subsection 3 of the CGST Act 2017, in case of supplies of goods in respect of which tax is paid or liable to be paid on reverse charge basis, the time of supply shall be the earliest of the following dates, namely, first, date of receipt of goods, or second, date of payment as entered in the books of account of the recipient or the date on which the payment is debited in his bank account, whichever is earlier. Or third, the date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice or any other document or similar other document thereof by the supplier, provided that where it is not possible to determine the time of supply under the above three clauses, the time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of account of the recipient of supply. Then, coming to the time of supply for services under reverse charge. As per Section 13, subsection 3 of the CGST Act 2017, in case of supplies for services in respect of which tax is paid or liable to be paid on reverse charge basis, the time of supply shall be the earliest of the following dates, namely the date of payment as entered in books of accounts of the recipient or the date on which the payment is debited in his bank account, whichever is earlier, or the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of invoice or any other document similar other document thereof by the supplier, provided where it is not possible to determine time of supply by using above methods, the time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of account of the recipient of the supply. Next comes the topic of compliances in respect of supplies under reverse charge mechanism. As per Section 31 of the CGST Act 2017, read with Rule 46 of the CGST Rules 2017, every tax invoice has to mention whether the tax in respect of supply in the invoice is payable on reverse charge. Similarly, this also needs to be mentioned in receipt voucher as well as refund voucher if tax is payable on reverse charge. Then maintenance of accounts by registered persons. Every registered person is required to keep and maintain records of all supplies attracting payment of tax on reverse charge. Then comes the point of payment of taxes under reverse charge mechanism. Any amount payable under reverse charge can only be done by debiting the electronic cash ledger of the recipient of the goods and services. The payment of tax under reverse charge cannot be done by debiting electronic credit ledger of the recipient of goods and services. Logically, electronic credit ledger is generally debited for paying output tax, whereas under reverse charge, when a recipient of goods and services is paying the tax, the said tax is an input tax and not the output tax. Hence, this input tax can only be paid by debiting electronic cash ledger. The amount of tax for which the electronic cash ledger of the recipient is debited can be claimed as input tax credit by the recipient. Then the next point is the invoice level information in respect of all supplies attracting reverse charge rate-wise are to be furnished separately in column 4B of GSTR1. Then the advance paid for reverse charge supplies is also leviable to GST. The person making advance payment has to pay tax on reverse charge basis. Now let's see step by step on how the whole reverse charge mechanism works. Step 1. Issuance of invoice by recipient for all reverse charge supplies. The recipient will issue the invoice when the supplier is unregistered. If the supplier is registered, then the invoice will be issued by the supplier himself. Next point is the issuance of payment vouchers by recipient at the time of payment in respect of reverse charge supplies. Next is the point of determination of time of supply of goods, services, or both in such cases. We discussed the provisions related to the time of supply under reverse charge mechanism in the previous slide. Then step 4 is the upload of invoice particulars in GSTR2, that is of inward supply for reverse charge liability. The supplier of goods or services is required to file GSTR1 and mention the supplies attracting tax on reverse charge basis in entry 4B as discussed earlier. Similarly, the registered recipient is required to file GSTR2 mentioning the inward supplies received from the registered supplier attracting reverse charge. It is important to note that unregistered taxable person making an outward supply of notified goods or services under reverse charge is not required to file returns under GST. Next point is payment of GST by e-cash ledger as credit is not permitted to be utilized for reverse charge liability. We discussed this in detail in the earlier slide. To just give you a revision of what we discussed relating to this payment, the payment under reverse charge can only be done by debiting the electronic cash ledger as the input tax credit, that is debiting of electronic credit ledger of is not permitted. But when the payment of GST by e-cash ledger is done, that amount of tax can be claimed as input tax credit by the recipient. And then the final step is claiming of input tax credit of taxes paid under reverse charge subject to eligibility as per the Act. So guys, this was all from my side. So let us see what all did we discuss in this presentation. We discussed the introduction to RCM. I hope I was able to clear what is the main difference between forward charge mechanism and reverse charge mechanism. Then section 9 subsection 4, GST registration under RCM, input tax credit under RCM, time of supply for goods under reverse charge, time of supply for services under reverse charge, and the compliances. So this was all from my side. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope that you liked the video. If you have any suggestions, then please leave it in the comment section below. Bye bye guys. I hope that you learned something from this video.